And good morning, everybody. We're live. Congratulations. It is Friday. You made it through the work week. Good job. You're still here.
And that's worth celebrating, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. My name is Bryan Armentrout with the Food Leadership Group, here with my good friend Jill Stuber, with the co-founder of Catalyst and the food safety coach. How you doing today, Jill?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me on, Bryan. It's a fun
Oh,
way to start my Friday.
it is, isn't it? Whenever I do these chats on Friday, I love it, right? It kind of just keeps you going for the rest of the day. It gives you a ton of energy and talking. And we had an amazing chat last week, lots of engagement. So I'm expecting a lot more of that today because today's topic is going to be really awesome. So one of the things that we like to do here on the chat as we start diving in here is let us know where in the world you're at, because it's always amazing, right? I'm in Loveland, Colorado, which is kind of north of the Denver area. And Jill, you're in lovely Minnesota. How's your weather today?
Actually, it's fantastic because just like a lot of the country, it's been so dry. And middle of the night, we started having thunderstorms and it's been raining all morning.
Nice. You're like, yes.
Exactly.
So it's kind of cool here in Colorado. This time of year, we get monsoonal weather. So we'll get moisture that comes up from Mexico, from the western side, and it will just come up, and you'll get afternoon showers and things like that. So it's kind of a nice little break from the heat. So that's always nice. Austin's here, and of course my good friend Robert Prevendar. Good to see you, Robert. Robert, very well known, of course, in the food industry. So we're honored to have you here, Robert. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining.
Excuse me. If you're new to the food safety chat, one of the things you're going to notice, and first off, we do this every Friday at this time, so please join us. And this is not a presentation. It's not a webinar. It's not this type of thing. This is a discussion. And I have the honor of bringing on experts in the field of food safety and quality assurance. And we pick a topic and we talk about it, right? So it's a great way to learn, because one of the things that Jill and I both believe very strongly is that food safety is not a point of competition. This is something that involves us all. And when there's a recall in one area, it impacts everybody. You can have the best food safety programs in your production facilities and in your company, but if your competitor isn't doing as well, guess what? That hurts you too. So that's a big part of what we're doing. So super glad to have you here. Now, one of the things, and I always do this because I want to jump into our topics right away, is everybody please pick up your favorite beverage and join us.
And it's my first cup today, Bryan. So, by the end of the show, I'll totally be on. No.
Morning, Ryan from Wisconsin. Good to see you.
Yeah,
so
I'm a Badger too. So hi Ryan.
Yeah, I've spent working in the dairy industry. I spent more than my fair share of time in Wisconsin. And we have family there too, which is nice. So one of the things that you'll notice here with the chat is that we like to kind of mix up the topics and talk about the technical things and also the people side of things. And it's super duper important to not forget that the people side of things is as equal to or more important than the technical stuff. Do we need to understand SQF? Yes. Do we need to understand the processes? Yes. All of these type of things, regulations, absolutely. But if you're unable to communicate that information, if you're unable to influence in your organization and you can't get things done, what does it matter?
Yeah. And Bryan, we've talked on more than one occasion, but that's really why I had started the food safety coach and we founded Catalyst, because, we look at how critical it is for us to have those technical skills. So technical experts, but how do we really step into being technical leaders? Because that's really where that magic happens for us to influence, to take care of our teams, to keep the pipeline going for food safety. There's so many parts that really center on the human side, but it's not always where our focus is.
Absolutely. And it's the ironic thing, isn't it, Jill, that the farther you advance in your career, the less important your technical skills become.
Right. And I chuckle because early in my career, I don't know how many times my mantra was essentially like, data will set me free. Science will set me free. And that clearly wasn't, that didn't help me all the way through each of my roles. So.
Oh, absolutely. And we see it on LinkedIn, right? We see we're scrolling in the feed or whatever, and somebody makes a comment and they have their name, and then after that they've got this alphabet soup of MS, PhD, SQF, PCQI, on and on and on and on. It's like, okay, well, that's nice, but that's not you, right? That's the skills you have. One of the things, especially once you get to a certain level, so I was vice president of quality in food companies for quite an amount of time, and I would be interviewing for director level positions or things like this, Jill. And one of the things right away that I would look for is how they would kind of go through their CV and list out their skills. If all they did was reiterate in their CV their job description, it's like, no, I don't care. I already know that you do these things. You're a director of quality. What did you do with it? Okay, great. Did you implement a program? Did you reduce complaints? Did you save the company money? Did you prevent a recall? What did you actually do with what you learned? How did you apply that? And it's amazing how many people don't understand that.
Well, once again, is that because of, even as we go through, whether it's school, whether it's formal training or even other certifications, right? We're still in this mode of we train, we take the quiz, we have the answer. And so doing that next translation to, okay, now I have this information and what do I do with it?
Yeah.
The funniest part is we do things with it, but sometimes we're not always great at articulating that or being able to share that, and even more so probably influence to make it even more effective.
Right. And I think, right, when you step back and look at this, Jill, at a 30,000 foot level, this is really what's going on with food safety culture, right? It's saying, okay, great, you're doing this, right? But how does this impact the big picture? Not only at your company, but within your industry, right? And it's helping, hopefully, to kind of open up that perspective.
Yeah. And, I would bet that there's a lot of people out there who, before we even knew the term food safety culture, like we felt this gap that we now call food safety culture.
Yeah.
Right. It was that space where we think that we've done all the right things, but we're still not quite there.
Yeah.
And knowing that we really need to help influence people to do the next step and really connect with people to have them want to do the next step. And so I think we've been talking about it really probably, I've been in this industry over 20 years and probably at least that. So probably longer. So, but now that we have this term, we feel like we can associate with that a little bit better. So, and if we have to name it to be able to get past it, fantastic.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, and really to your point early on, right, we would see this. I mean, so I would have a quality manager who was frustrated in a plant and was talking with me and saying, Bryan, they just won't do what I need them to do.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting, right? That's influence, and that's really what our topic is about here today. And it's around resilience. And so when Jill and I were preparing for this show, that word kind of really stuck out for me, right? Is resilience in how you do things, right? And we hear about this skill set, right? It doesn't apply to what we're talking about now. It's really for any career, right? Is how do you do these things for the long run? And one of the best ways to look at things is, okay, if I'm helping the company to grow and do things better and be safer and make better product and all these types of things that we talk about, this isn't something that you just go in and you flip a switch, right? These are processes that take a long time because, it's that old analogy, right? You're turning the boat, right? This is a giant cruise ship. It's not a little speedboat.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love, right, whether it's, I always talk about like the aircraft carrier. It's not turning right on a dime. Or if you want to use it's the marathon, not the sprint, whichever it is. I think sometimes, right, we kind of get the the tunnel vision of, gosh, it's just not working today. It's not working this week. And I think it's really powerful when we actually can step back for a moment and go, but what have we done over the past year? What have we done over the past 3 years? Remember when we used to do this? Because I think those are the things that help remind us of the progress we are making, even if it doesn't seem like we're making the progress we want to make.
That's a really good point, because part of we forget our successes, right? We just focus on what we didn't get done. And that's always not a really good way to look at things. There was this crazy CFO I worked for. He was a really interesting character in a previous company. And we were doing orientation meetings, and he sat down with me and we're talking, and all of a sudden he goes, Bryan, this company is like a river. And I'm like, oh, okay. And he goes, you just jumped in the water with us, right? And you're looking around and we're all bobbing in the water and you have no idea what just happened upstream. You don't know what's behind the bend. You're looking around. Some people are, they're paddling water and they're doing just fine. Other people, they're just barely keeping their head above water. Other people, right, they're all beat up and, did they hit rocks? What happened? Nobody knows, right? Other people, right, are clamoring for the shore and they're getting off and they're running somewhere else, right? His point was you have no context. It's not fair to jump in at that point and say, okay, I'm here now. Now the river starts. No, it doesn't. Right. So you're in that water with them and now you're all in that together moving forward. So how do you do things? Right.
That's a great analogy, because often we do think we jump in and we're like, well, depending on where you're at, either like, what's this train wreck? Or, wow, everything looks pretty good. And then you either hit rapids or, something.
Yeah. And there's no company is perfect.
No.
Zero. Right. It's just the problems change. Right. When you're a smaller company and you're entrepreneurial and you're moving fast, right. It's cash flow and how do we get things done? And geez, we really have to sell this product into Costco or whatever. Right. As the company grows and expands, those problems change, but they're still there, right? If you're a big food company, right, you have an army of suppliers that are sending you stuff, right? The programs are the same, the scope changes, right? So you need to think about how do I, as I evolve with this company floating down the river, how do I make sure that I'm planning ahead, right? And that's a key point. And I think really one of the first things we wanted to talk about is within quality, we're in a unique position, Jill, in that we get to poke our nose into a whole lot of different stuff.
We
right?
do.
If you're in procurement, right, you're primarily focused on procurement. Yeah, you're helping R&D find things and whatever else, but that's your main goal is looking at that. Quality is involved not only with how we're making products safe and these type of activities, but it's also building out the systems. How are we doing things as a company? And a lot of times we think that just applies to our area. No, anybody within a company who touches the product, right? So you're talking executives, marketing, sales, operations, R&D, legal, communications, plants, you name it, right? It's almost everybody in the company, right? And you need to figure out, okay, where do we need to be? And the farther up in the organization in this group you are, right, the farther out you need to be planning. So if you're in charge of quality for the company and you're saying, okay, well, we want to get certification and the new standard is coming up and GFSI is changing this and that's going to be happening 3 years from now. And there's a potential merger coming up, right? You need to be thinking big picture. And if you're not, it's going to catch up with you at some point.
It will. And, I think with that, one of the things that as food safety quality professionals, because I know we'll talk about this at some point, we do this because we're passionate about it. And that's what I love about people in this area, that we really love what we do and all of these interactions. But with that said, because we do touch every part of an organization and even outside, it's also a really heavy load.
Yeah.
We recognize that everything is connected and we see the holes in the systems or the processes. And so we really have this strong sense of responsibility about how we're moving forward and, trying to gain the buy-in to be able to move those forward because we see all those places that stick out.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times, right? Well, number one, there's easier ways to make money than what we do in food safety and food quality, right? To your point, it's an incredible burden, right? It's a ton of responsibility. We do it because we care, right? We want to make safe food. We want to make sure that when we have our morning coffee and we give our children their Cheerios or whatever they have for breakfast, that it's safe and we don't have to give it a second thought, right? That's an incredible burden. Now, paradoxically, right, as you look at this big picture and you figure out what are those things, to your point, Jill, you start looking at it and saying, oh, geez, there's a ton of stuff to do. Oh, my goodness. Right. And a lot of people get overwhelmed. And I would see this in my role when people would come to me and say, oh, my God, Bryan. And then they would start rattling off their list of complaints of things that they didn't like. And then they would look at me when they were done. And I'm like, okay.
Solve it.
Exactly. Right? And what they were thinking at that point in time was, no, that was my solution. My solution was to give you my problems. I'm like, no, you need to figure out how to fix these. Come back to me with a plan. and what's important and what needs to be prioritized, right? Because I think that's part of the problem, right? Is quality people get overwhelmed. They see the big picture, and the big picture scares them, and they don't know where to start.
Yeah. And, I think that's part of that moving from technical expert to technical leader.
Yeah.
Because right when we're a technical expert, we know like here's the problem, we navigate through these steps, we get some type of answer. But if that doesn't work out right, do we have enough curiosity to continue asking the questions to get to the next step?
Right.
Sometimes it's hard when we have so many moving parts within an organization. And so, learning those skills for, negotiating and influencing, collaborating, all the things that we talk about all the time, right? But, doing that in a space where you have someone continuing to reinforce that for you. Because, we've all done that, right? Where we go to like the HR sponsored course for 4 hours, we're all happy, we, do something fun, and then we go back to our real life and we don't necessarily use that. And so, I think that's a great one where it's like, how do we help really reinforce for people to move into that next space and be curious and really help them help themselves?
Exactly. Right. So, and that helps them grow.
Mhm.
Part of the
Tremendously.
tendency, right, is if you work in a technical field, if you're good at it, right, you tend to hoard, right? So I started off in microbiology, and I was a really good microbiologist. I could get work done faster than anybody else. It was always, and then I would train people, and I'm like, okay, here's how you streak a plate, and here's how you do these type of things. Like, okay, now you do it, and they're like, trying to do it, right? And I'm like, no, give me that back, right? It's like that old joke, right? It's like this is a sexist man, woman, husband joke, right? But like if you don't want to do laundry, just screw it up really, really bad one day, and then your wife's like, "Oh my God, you ruined all my clothes." Okay, fine, never do laundry again, you idiot, right? And then you're like, "Yes," right? And I'm not endorsing that plan, by the way. But
Well, right, we all get to have choice on where we put that plan in place or not. But especially when we're leading people, right, the more we can help them step into, because sometimes when we just bring problems, it's almost, lack of better term, but it's almost a victim mentality. Like, oh,
yeah,
things have been done to me and or here, and I, now what? Instead, like to another buzzword, empower them, but really have them tap their own resourcefulness, because often they're already thinking like, here's what I think should happen, or here's what I'm wondering about. And so the more we can kind of just tease that out of them, the more they can be confident in that they know the next step.
yep,
So,
absolutely. We
which
want
kind of goes to, I
to,
think Austin asked about curiosity. And I think
yeah,
that's part of how you do that. You start in with those, I always say, answer a question with a question. Step one.
oh. Good
So,
point. Good point. Jennifer had a comment here. Good morning, Jennifer. Always good to see her.
hi, Jen.
Collaboration in the network of food safety professionals has helped weather a lot of crazy time.
Mhm.
Peeps like everyone on this chat, creating food safety champions help too. And Jennifer's bringing up a good point, right?
Yeah.
Is that you're not alone, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes when you're sitting in a plant and you're the quality manager, you're just feeling the weight of the world on you.
Yes.
You're not alone, right? You're not alone. And I think that's part of our wiring in food safety and food quality, is that we want to take it all on, and we don't have to.
Mhm.
We should, well, I mean, we shouldn't take it all on, right?
No.
Uh, a lot of times you'll see this behavior in plants. Something happens, right? There's a problem. And they go to the quality person, right? And this is one of my pet peeves, right? So let's say they have a production issue and product's out of spec. We had a quality issue. I'm like, what? What do you mean we had a quality issue? No, we had a production issue. I didn't make it. You made it. So don't call it a quality issue. So, okay, let's start figuring this out, right? And then you start diving into it. And the operation people walk away, right? All they've really done is handed you their problem, right? So this is just a different variant of what we just talked about, right? It's like, hey, we have a quality problem. You need to fix this. We need to ship orders. And then
Yeah.
they walk away and they start going back to what they were doing. And it's like, no, we're going to work on this together, right? I'll help. Of course, I'm part of the team, but this is a plant issue. This is not a quality issue.
Bryan, and as you tell that story, and I know we've shared that story, you've shared that with me before, and I always find it so fascinating because when I was a kid, my mom used to say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And
Mm,
blah, 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 parents, right? Um, but the more I learn about culture and the more I learn about just, interacting better with humans and helping understand where we're all coming from.
mhm.
And one of the things that always comes out is like, how do we help shift the conversation? So instead of, hey, this is a quality problem, wow, all we have to do is rephrase that slightly, and we've created a completely different approach.
Mhm.
And so just by shifting that little bit of how we present something, how we respond to something, really can show like who we're showing up as, in the space with other people to help be supportive and to help drive the culture that we want to see.
Right. And in there, you said an important word, right? People, right?
Mhm.
Everybody's bringing a different situation, right? So if there's a person on the floor who snaps at somebody else and is having a bad day, maybe their mom is sick, right? Maybe their kid is having problems at school. Who knows, right? Is it your job to pry in and figure those things out? No, of course not. But you need to take those contexts into consideration, right? Everybody has bad days. Now, if
Mhm.
somebody is continually showing up every day and doing a bad job and has a bad attitude, okay, right? You need to address those things, right? But you need to take those things into consideration, right? And a lot of times, just simply acknowledging that, to your point, Joel, and saying, "Hey, you all right? Everything okay?" "Oh, no, no, yeah, it's just that, yeah, my dog is not feeling too well and barfed all over the floor this morning. I'm in a bad mood." It's like, "Oh, that sucks," right? Yeah, my dog does that all the time. And so, right, just that little bit of recognition versus, "Hey, what are you doing? Get to work," right?
Well,
Um,
and even that's kind of that shift in culture, because I know even when I started, the culture around business is business, personal is personal. Never shall the two mix,
right.
which, I can look back now and I can see that I really had struggled with that because, well, I'm a people person. Even though I'm an introvert, I love people.
Mhm.
And so not mixing those two and being able to kind of, we always talk about that, bringing your whole self to work. Like when we ask people to separate those things for the sake of business, we're losing a portion of like their gifts and what they can contribute. And so really, how do we step into the space where, we shift from this business is business or science is science and data is data, which we know is important, but yet how can we lead with a soft heart? Because food safety culture is people centric. It's about leading from the heart.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I know when I would visit plants or things like this, something I loved to see when I was on the floor was engagement, right? So if
Mhm.
I walked out on a production facility floor and I'm getting a tour or whatever, right? And the people look up and they're like, "Oh, oh, visitor, cool," right? And they ask me questions. "Hi, who are you? What are you doing here?" "Oh my God, yeah, we love selling product to you," or whatever, right? Versus head down, right? Don't talk to me, right? Boy, those little subconscious verbal body language type cues tell you a ton about the culture, right?
Mhm.
And how people interact in those facilities.
Yeah.
Super important, right? And
It
I
is,
think too that
and not something we always see, right? Because we're in our own facilities. But that's a really good point of, when you have that opportunity to pause for a moment and look and observe, and do you like what you see?
Mhm.
And really think about like how is that interaction happening and what type of energy is there that's, you know transferring between maybe visitors and your team members or just in general. Do you
Yeah,
like what you see?
exactly. And really, this was a mistake for me early in my career. And this is part of the cultures of the company I worked on early on. To your point, right? And I think this has changed quite a bit. Is yeah, work is work. Put in the hours, and eventually you'll get a promotion and blah blah blah. And part of my viewpoint at that point in time, right, was okay, if I work, if I do really, really good work and I work really, really hard, that means the bosses are going to notice and good things will happen. No,
Mm.
nope, doesn't work that way.
No, it that's kind of an old story. And so
Yeah,
how do we create the story that really serves us better?
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Um, and so that was a hard lesson for me, right? And so as
Yeah.
I grew in the organization and fought through that and figured these things out, Then I was on the other side. And so in the past, in a company I was at, every quarter, the senior leadership would get together, and it was the responsibility of every department head to bring forward a candidate in their department that they considered a high potential person. And the goal was to introduce and get the other people who didn't interact with that person to understand her a little bit better. And oh yeah, this person is on my team. She works in technical services, and she is much more than that. And here's what else she's doing, and these other activities and stuff like that. And for those people who didn't normally interact with her, they'd be like, "Oh wow, I didn't know that. Well, I'm gonna have to do some stuff in these areas with her too." And it helps open up that perspective, right, and get a better understanding of just the skill set.
Yeah. And and what I love about that is that it's recognizing that as when you're a leader, when you're a manager, part of our role, right? We're supposed to develop our team.
Yeah,
And so, right, if you came to that meeting and you didn't have somebody, what does that say to you about your leadership and manager skills?
right.
Like, are you doing the right things if you don't have somebody that you're going to bring forth and nominate? And I think that's really important because you know, there's so many openings right now in companies. There's more roles to go around than people, it seems.
Right.
And sometimes I chuckle a little when I hear people say, well, we just don't have anybody ready in our company. And I think, oh, okay, I get that because I've been there, right? But then I
Mhm.
think, oh, what's that perspective? Because our role is supposed to be helping prepare people for each of those roles,
Right.
even before they're open.
Mhm.
And so how do we step away from the other distractions that we have, or lean into that, or get additional support to help develop people so that when that opens, we can fill that gap and we don't have to have so much of the pain of trying to manage two jobs, spread everything out across the team, or whatever those things are.
No, that's a really good point, right? And that if you don't have those people ready and you don't have that plan in place, that's a reflection on you. That's not
Mhm,
them.
mhm.
Right.
And we've all seen these cases, right, where we try our best to help develop someone and they're not interested.
Mhm.
And that's okay. Because I
Right.
know that happens. And I think that's a really great time to lean into this soft heart and find what is their passion.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, right, we all do what we do because we want purpose. And so if they're
Yep.
not feeling the purpose in that role, then where do they? Let's help them once again share their gifts wherever that may be, and even develop them into another place in the organization. Or sometimes it's even outside the organization, but that's helping the greater good.
Exactly. Right. And we don't necessarily understand their context, right?
Mhm.
So in a production facility, it's my contention that the majority of the people in that facility are happy doing what they're doing, right? If they're not happy doing what they're doing, you need to identify that too and help them move on to something that will make them happy. But most people are like, I love my job. It gives me satisfaction. It gives me some spending money. It allows me to go, and visit my kids on the weekends or whatever. I'm fine. I'm fine. Right. I want to get better at what I do, but I'm happy doing what I'm doing. Great. But there is a group of people in every facility, and everybody knows who they are, right? They're the people who ask questions. They're the people who want to do things better. They're the people saying, I'm bored. I want more. Right. And if you don't help those people, they're going to leave. They will leave.
They will, and with that, when I think about people being happy at work, just because even though I love to be human centric, I still gravitate towards numbers too, right?
Right.
The Gallup numbers around engagement have not significantly shifted for decades. And when you think about 70 to 80% of people working in the US are not engaged. That's
Mhm.
a lot of people showing up every day that are like, well, it's good enough. It's
Yeah.
good enough. And I think it was Zappos who actually does this little experiment. And if it's not Zappos, maybe somebody knows and can drop it in. But what I love is there's some time period after people are onboarded or at different points where they offer them money to quit,
Mm.
because they want to make sure people are so engaged that like we'll actually pay you, because if you're not here all in and like paddling upstream in the boat, like let's find a better place for you. Let's find a different boat where you feel like you can join in and paddle. And I just find that fascinating because how do we shift that? How do we get people? How do we really move into that space where we can shift that in our organizations and really have everybody paddling in the same way, and not just showing up saying, well, it's good enough. I got my paycheck. I do the work. I go home, but then it all goes from my mind.
I just tune out, right? And a big chunk of that, in my contention, I'd love to hear your opinion on this, is you don't work for a company, right? You work for a boss.
Yeah.
If you have a bad boss, your life is miserable. It doesn't matter how good the company programs are. Every day you're just like, oh, right? What's my knucklehead boss going to do today?
Yeah.
Conversely, if you have a good boss and you're working in an okay or not so good company, that boss shields you and protects you from a lot of different things. And I've worked for both, and I tell you what, it makes a gigantic difference.
It really does, and I'm guessing that's part of why you wrote the new leader mindset, new manager mindset book, right? Because it is the manager, and there's plenty of data to show direct managers are the ones who really are the difference makers for team members.
Absolutely.
They're the ones who help give them purpose. They are the ones who show the appreciation. They are the ones that bring the information so they see how they connect to the bigger picture. All of those parts that we know, like we all strive to have that. Like that's that dreamy spot. And the thing is it's possible for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So got some good comments going here. So let's see here. So Austin made a good comment here. So moving from quantitative to observational / qualitative assessments can be hard for people. Oh God, yeah. And so one of my points I always like to make is work instructions don't train people, right? And we think so. And this really goes back, Jill, to ISO 9001 and how documentation was viewed when people really started putting it together. And there was a mantra that drove me nuts, which is anybody should be able to read this work instruction and do this job.
Yeah.
Bull. Never, ever.
But that's how we were trained originally, that it should work that way, and it doesn't.
Work.
No. And that's why you hear Tia and I say all the time, programs don't equal culture. And I know, Austin, you were even helping spread that message at IAFP, but we keep layering on GFSI and other requirements, and those aren't going to get us the win.
Right. Yep. So that critical point when you're the new guy in a company, right, is who are you working with, right? So ideally they have a buddy system so that, hey, welcome new guy. Let's kind of show you the ropes and what you need to do and when you need to show up and how you run your equipment and all these type of things. Oh, hey, by the way, on Friday we're going bowling or whatever. Those type of things, right? And then that interaction, and then the supervisor, right? Your direct supervisor. Because then that trainer is going to be getting with that supervisor to give them feedback, right? And that loop of that assessment, I have yet to find an exception for that. That's how training really works and how assessments really work.
Yeah,
it's not a procedure.
Nope, it's building community, because when people feel that they are part of something bigger and feel responsibility as kind of like a citizen of that community, that's when we have buy-in.
Yeah. Kimberly had a good comment here. In an industry where data and numbers are vital, how do we measure prevention? How do we measure the absence of illness, right? Oh, God. And that's one of the huge challenges of what we do. Thank you, Kimberly.
The $1 million question, Kimberly.
Yeah,
Probably $1 billion.
Yeah, the irony of what we do, Jill, is that if we do it well, nobody notices, right? There's no recall. The product's going out the door. Everything is wonderful, right? And that people just assume that happened magically, right? We know it didn't, right? We know the incredible amount of work that went into place to make that happen. So the analogy I use, Jill, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this too, right, is look at other industries and other disciplines, right? So occupational safety is very good at this. Near misses, right? Sure. It's like, oh, hey, a guy in the warehouse almost got hit by the forklift. Ooh, right? So if that almost happened, that means it can happen. So what can we do to prevent this from happening, right? Yeah. And so I think in a lot of ways, right, we try and translate that over into what we do in quality. And in some ways that you can do it would be, like looking at complaint trends, right? Putting in triggers early in that process so that you can look at those really quickly. So if you're getting 3 complaints on the same line at the same production day, you need to take a look, right? Yeah. We used to call those quality work alerts at a company I used to work at, and that would automatically get escalated to the regional quality manager, because you can't go chasing every little thing, right? You need to figure out where to focus. And if you can catch a problem early, great, right? Another good example of this is maintenance, right? We're seeing more preventive maintenance, and now they're moving to predictive maintenance, right?
Yeah.
Same thing.
Oh,
What
yeah.
can we learn from those guys?
Yeah, Brian, I think that's a really good point. And I think to almost the comment that Austin that you had about the observations and qualitative data, I wonder sometimes how we can bring that in more, in the sense that, let's say, even if we talk about, let's say, the OSHA near misses, if we just have the number up on the chart, like, hey, we had 5 near misses this week, they go, oh great, that's less than last week, let's move on. But when we can share, right, maybe, or gosh, that's more, what are we doing? But if we can share the story, like, actually, somebody almost had their hand cut off, or yes, somebody almost got ran over with the forklift. How do we help create more of this visibility and almost emotional part? Because when we talk about, right, like getting our foot ran over by a forklift, like my foot instantly like goes, ooh. There's a reaction to that. And I think that's part of how we can bring in some of that near misses, and the preventative side that we do is talking about what could have happened, and really helping reinforce the good work that we're doing, because we avoided the train wreck, right?
Exactly.
So,
Well, and I think too, I mean, the closest thing that on the food safety side of things that we have for near misses are recalls, right? We would never wish a recall on another company, right? If you've ever been through one, it's a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. But share that information. If a company has a big recall and it's in your industrial space, let other people in the company know, right? Because a lot of times there's a false belief that, oh, it'll never happen to us. And then it does, right? So part of that is not being right? Being, look at all, just let people know, right? Because we assume that people know what we know outside of our circle. They don't, right? If you're working in sales or marketing, you have no visibility into this.
Yeah, which really was part of the second thing. It's that communication path.
Yeah.
Because how many times there's like fantastic things that are going on in our facilities, but yet that doesn't always filter up so other people hear it. And so I think as a leader, part of our role is, how do we on a regular basis make sure we're sending that information up? We're making sure that's getting communicated so that people are appreciating it and seeing all the good parts happening, not just always the emergency crisis.
Exactly. And that's part of the reason why I put together the locals group, right? So twice a week at least, I will go through and post recalls that catch my attention. There's also a membership group in there that has videos and other resources and things as well too, right? Free, right? It's a free resource where you can get this information to help share that. Yeah, don't be a naysayer, don't be a scold or things like this. You're just letting people know. And if you can tie it into your business and let other people outside of that understand that, it's like, okay, this is happening. Let's take a real world example right now, infant formula, right? Okay, these things are going on in infant formula. Here's what this could potentially mean for our company, because FDA is now focusing on Coronabacter and spore formers and bacillus or things like this. This could have a potential impact in our company, right? Now other groups start to understand that, right? It's like, oh, right? FDA is going to be looking at this, or our customers are going to be asking about this, or our consumers are going to be contacting us and asking. Yeah, right. Now you're contributing outside of your group.
Yeah.
And that's what you need, right? Which really gets to Sebastian's comment, right? Because this is something that, you see, you work your butt off, right? And you're working super hard. And there's some knucklehead who works in a similar field as you, right? And gets promoted. And you're like, what? Why in the world would they promote that person over me? Right? It's not because of their skills, right? It's because of their ability to communicate and provide those other skills outside of those technical hard skills, right? They're seen in the organization. So if you're not seen, nobody knows.
No, and I think once again, all that comes back to kind of our leadership. And even if we don't have direct reports, this plays into that, where like, how are we showing up every day? How are we being when we're with other people? Those are the things that people see and sense about us. So if we can honor our values, even if it means, we're not getting that next promotion, but what are the things that you're holding that help you stay true to who you are, so that you're ready for the next one? Exactly. Or how do you prepare to be able to say, gosh, that's where I want to go. So how do I step up and advocate for myself?
Mhm.
How do I do this so that I can help share and show the gifts that I have and how I'm contributing to the bigger picture in the organization? Because if we don't do that, it's not too often that somebody else is just going to like do a flyover and be like, hey, that person, let's pick them out. So it does take, a good leader to help you continually develop. And it also takes some of our own self-awareness to know when and how to advocate for ourselves.
Yes. Because never forget, the HR department is not there for your career.
No.
They're there for the company.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's your responsibility, right? You need to really look at this. So Cortland asked a question: who trains the Gallup system? Not quite sure of your question and what you're exactly looking for. I'll give it a stab, and you can try it too, Jill. But and Cortland, if we don't answer your question, you let us know. So in the past, so Gallup is a company, right? And companies can subscribe, and then you can take the Gallup poll. And I worked in the company in the past where we did this. And I was fortunate that I scored well for my team. And part of this was really getting an understanding of it, because they take a really interesting approach in that they back into the results. So, for example, there's a question on Gallup that says, I have a best friend at work.
Mm-hmm.
What? Right? And you look at that question, and everybody on my team was like, what in the hell is that?
I have a best friend at work.
Who cares, right? Quality. Who cares about that stuff? And
that's too touchy-feely. What about data? Oh, wait, sorry.
Exactly. And we really pushed back on the Gallup people, and we're like, what in the world does this have to do with everything? And they're like,
very much.
We have asked this question a million different ways, but here's what we've found is that teams that score high on this question are high performing teams.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, So they don't necessarily know why, but that's the reason. It's weird.
And they have a fantastic book. Oh, hold on. If you're wondering and want to read more about it, it's The Manager by Gallup.
Oh, look at that.
It's an amazing book. So if you really want to dive into it a little bit more, this goes through many of those types of questions where people go, well, why is that important? And it's amazing because really it's about, have I created the community so people feel that they belong, so they want to stay and participate and contribute.
Right.
And so with Gallup, they can provide, kind of an objective view of your engagement through that, and also a comparison to benchmark across other organizations. With that said, here's the bottom line. You can go out into your organization and have conversations with people. Mm-hmm. And you can probably find out, or you probably even have a sense of how your company's feeling, how team members are feeling. That's that human-centric side. And Gallup's putting numbers to it, because that's what we like. We like KPIs. We like to see things shift. But as I mentioned, Gallup themselves will even say, over the past couple decades, no significant shifts. I mean, yes, there are some that happen, but it's not, we're talking about averages of averages. So, right, to get something to shift, you need like the Titanic to hit it. So, that's something just so you to be mindful of as you're starting to look at that, to see what is your goal and what's your bigger question behind perhaps looking at something like Gallup.
Right. And so part of that, right, is, and it seemed when I first heard this from the Gallup trainers, it seemed like a cop-out. But they came back and said, well, what's important is what that question means to your team members.
That too.
Right? Is, okay, what does the best friend at work mean to you? Right? And some people are going to be like, I don't give a crap about that. Right? And so I'm here to do work. Right? Okay, I understand. This person is coming from a technical mindset versus somebody else who says, oh, for me, a best friend at work means they know when my birthday is. And no, I mean, we don't need to hang out or things like that, but they recognize that I'm a person. Right? Oh, interesting. Right? So that question can provide some really amazing insights.
It can. Yeah.
But it's up to you to figure it out, right? Gallup can't figure it out for you, right? It's kind of like production planning in a big company. At the aggregate level, everything is going well. But when you get down to the actual SKUs, right, you have shortages and cuts and customers who aren't being supplied and things like this, right? If you just focus on the big picture, you're missing a lot. So you need to look into that. So that was an important point there.
I know. The audience, you're amazing. Like, there's all these comments coming in. So
right? Which is great, right? I mean, this shows how important this is.
And
So Larry had a
Jennifer
point.
has one about, oh, sorry, even the next
Oh, go ahead.
generation that's hard to fill. And I think that's definitely a big area for us to consider because as we think about how we position food safety and quality and how T and I just did a show about radical redesign of roles in food safety and quality
Oh,
because of this exact thing, Jennifer, because we have people that look at what we do and they're like, I don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole because we see people that are quality managers that are going through litigation, they're going to jail. Who wants to step into that?
right.
Especially if we have to work so hard to influence to get support.
Mhm.
And I think that's where, as a community, we get this opportunity to like look at how do we want to change the conversation about what we do? How do we want to look at changing how we design our roles, how we design what we expect out of people, so that we really start aligning and thinking about how do we take care of our people in food safety and quality?
Yeah. Yeah. Because to Jennifer's point, right? We have a tendency, right? So the old adage was, right, the world begins when you're born.
Yeah.
And right, we tend to see that view. And we have these new generations coming up, right? To this, right? And how do you relate to these people, right? And they have a different perspective. And so we need to change too, right? And recognize these type of things.
And sometimes we think about like, oh, they just want to go from being the intern to the CEO. And I would say that's not it, but that's the cry or that's the request for development. So,
Mhm.
Bryan, if I can plug for a moment, right? That's what we do at Catalyst, leadership, technical leadership development. So that way we can help your teams really move into that space and have that path. So that way they're not like, we're out of here.
Exactly. I mean, the bottom line is in any company. So I think the rule is, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, right, is to be an effective leader, you can really only have around 6 or so people reporting directly to you.
Yeah.
Any more than that, you're overwhelmed. And you see that through the entire organization, all the way up to the CEO, right? So you have the VP of marketing, the VP of sales, and the VP of operations, and whatever,
And
right?
finance and T and
Yeah, a handful of people. And that applies in quality as well, right? So even when I was running quality at a $3.5, $4 billion company, I only had 4 direct reports, right? And they managed their areas. And guess what? 95% or more of the company, I have no direct influence over, right? So if you're going to be effective, you need to not rely on I'm the boss and right. You do what I tell you to do, because that only works a very, very small bit.
yeah.
And you need to be able to influence and communicate and see other people's perspective outside of your department because they have different goals than you do.
Yeah. And what I always like to come back to is it's all possible. Like, even though there are times, and we probably all felt this in food safety and quality, right? Those days where you go home and you're like, oh, I nailed it today. Like, we made a difference. It was awesome. Granted, I've had those days where I'm like, I could leave right now at lunch and never come back. Um,
Keep driving.
right. So, when we think about how do we really help people have more of the moments of, wow, today was really powerful. Today we really made a difference. And that's what we're here to do as technical leaders.
Yep, exactly. One of the visuals I use is this, right? Right. This is the stuff that's hitting you in the face every day, right? And to your point, if all you do is fight fires and you go home at night and you think you were successful, you weren't, right? All you did was continue what was going on. And you made it through another day. And that gets old really quick, right? You need to kind of look through your fingers at the big picture and say, why are these things happening, right? It kind of gets back to our near miss discussion here earlier. And if you're able to do that and start asking bigger questions in your company, people are going to notice.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that big picture is important. And Ryan reminds us the little things matter too.
Yeah.
And they do. That's part of that human connection again, right? And noticing those little things do make a difference.
Absolutely. Cortland had an interesting question here. Anybody use marketplace chaplains to assist in helping employees with personal lives?
I know nothing about that.
I haven't seen that, but I mean, we're seeing more and more of that, right? So if a crisis happens or a tragedy happens, right? You see this in schools and things like this, right? Say, okay, resources are available to help people work through that. But God, that's a good observation, Corla. I mean, what type of resources are available in companies if something happens, right?
Right.
Hey, we're reorganizing and we've been acquired. Here's your severance package.
Right. Well, and even if it's not to that extent, right, there are some companies that are able to offer some like employee support. Usually there's a number to call and they can connect you to the right resources. So I think having those things really helps demonstrate that we're here to take care of our team, right? We're here to help with the total person and that well-being, which is really an important part of, once again, feeling like we belong.
Yeah, absolutely. And to Ryan's point, right? If you're working in a company that has a toxic culture, right, that can really short circuit everything, and gives off bad vibes, right? I mean, so part of this, right, is sometimes it's the realization that maybe you can't, right? Maybe a company doesn't want to change, right? Maybe they're happy with the way it is, right? Everything comes from the leader, right? So if you have an owner of a company who likes it that way, guess what? It's not going to change, right? So you've got some hard decisions to make. It's like, okay, can I produce a protective bubble that, for my team, again, you work for a boss, not a company, to protect my team and get things done and move things forward? Or is this an unwinnable battle? I'm just going to end up, drinking too much wine on Fridays and getting all the gray hair.
I have coffee. I promise it's only coffee. Oh,
right.
But Bryan, I think when you talked about too, right, there are these moments where sometimes we think, but it's so difficult. Why would we do it? And there was a great book I had read, and I wish I remember the title, but the person had responded, and they weren't in food safety. It was a different tough role, but they said, if I don't do it, who else will? And if we want to see change here, how will that happen if none of us are willing to step up? And I thought it was really powerful because, right, there's been times in food safety where we're, like I said, it's lunch, I could leave and never come back. And I think sometimes just once again thinking about, but we're still making a difference, even if we're struggling. And I'm always going to say this caveat: you only know your situation and kind of where you're at with, your mental health and what works for you, and maybe even perhaps the actual risk an organization presents. But even with that, there are times that we're still making a difference for other people that we're working with and around. And sometimes that's even more powerful than the trying to convince, to get another couple bucks from our top leader. There are some trade-offs there.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the reality of what we do.
Right. And I mean, kind of the meta conversation, what we're having here too, right, is this stuff is hard, right? It's not easy. It's as hard or harder than the skill set of the technical side of things.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
But if you figure out the right way for you to do it, to Jill's point, right, you need to overlay this with how you approach things. If you're able to unlock this, oh man, right? Huge. Your career can pretty much go where you want it to go if you figure this out.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's amazing to see people, people that we work with that we see the light bulb where they're like, oh, I'm leading people. Yeah. I'm helping move this forward. And it's just this really fantastic transformation that we can see. And it's not always a light bulb for everyone, but it takes time because we've had years of training and hearing, like, follow the data, follow the science, follow this. Right. And so really bringing people into that is the key.
Yep, absolutely. And it gets into the, why we chose the word resilience for this talk today is, right, this is the long haul, right? If you think that you're going to come into a company and it's like, okay, I'm here now, right? Everything is perfect. Oh man, you're in for a rough ride, right? Because you don't understand the context. You don't understand the history. You don't understand what's upstream, right? You don't understand why people are in the position that they're in. That takes time, right?
It does.
There's this false belief in quality that if we write a procedure or we write a work instruction that people will go, oh, okay, well, now I know. No, absolutely not, right? I call it the Moses syndrome, right? We think that if we write it on the tablets and we walk down the mountain, that we're going to hand it to people and they're going to do it.
Nope. And I think that also goes into that curiosity because we've all experienced it. We've all seen it where we go, this is what I want. And we get it. And we're like, well, that's not exactly what I want. I wanted this. And we kind of go through these iterations and we do the same things at work. And so that's why it's so helpful to remember that still leaning in to be curious, like what will this difference will this make? How would this look differently? Like what needs to shift to make this happen? Really those big questions that help us lean into that. So individuals can actually even kind of better navigate what it is that they need to move forward. What is it that will help them feel more fulfilled? What is it that helps solve that gap or that problem in our system? That's all, once again, going back to people.
Right. And that's what's so cool about what we do, right? Consulting and coaching and things, right? We're kind of outside, right? We get to come into a company and it gives us this fresh perspective, right? We're able to really understand one size doesn't fit all, right? Everybody is different. I never go into a company and say, oh, okay, here's all the procedures you need. Here's all the documents. Here you go. Have a nice day. No, never, ever, ever. Everything is different. Everybody has a different way of doing things. And you have to understand their story of why they do things the way they do and what it is that they want to do and what are their goals. There's the procedural side of things and there's the people side of things, and you have to tackle both of those. And so I feel very fortunate that I'm able to do that, right? Because it gives you that unique perspective from all these different industries. But guess what? We're all trying to do the same thing, right? We're all just trying to do it in different ways because people are different. So Mario has some good comments here. Mario is always great for comments. We as food safety professionals, rather than building a food safety plan and management system, should be more concerned with improving culture. This is something Frank said. Today, food safety is recognized to be a people issue, right? And finally, right? And so he's saying yes, and he's right, 100%. That's a great way to end this conversation. So, thank you. And right, we could talk about this a long time.
We could.
Because there's a million different things. And a lot of times, right? So if I'm doing a webinar or things like this, I'll do it on a particular topic and people will start asking me very specific questions at the end. How do I do this? Right. And I'm like, I don't know. Right. Putting a comment in here doesn't give me enough context, right? You're understanding the basics and you're starting down the path, but this is something that needs to be figured out, right? There's no one size fits all, right? So when you overlay, right, all of the different products and all the different people and all the different industries and the regulations and everything, right? These all need to be tailored to a specific approach. And I think that's what makes what we do very fun and rewarding for sure.
It does. And I always think, take a moment and even celebrate that you're asking the question. Because sometimes we think, oh, I don't have the answer and it's not working. But you've already planted the seed. The wheels are already turning because you're asking the right questions. And now it's just following that path because you're collecting the information and you're asking the right things. So if you're here asking those questions, awesome.
Right. And there's 3 words in our field that people fear more than others. They hate saying this. I don't know. Right? That's not a flaw. Right. No. It's actually an opportunity, right? If you don't know something, be excited, right? That's an area where you can develop your skills. And if you're in a meeting and there's a problem that's going on and nobody has an answer, if you're the person who's able to say, that's really good. I don't know the answer to that. Let's start to put together some information and looking at this and start tackling this problem, right? Your prestige and your respect in that organization just went up, right? Versus trying to BS and pretend like you do know when you really don't. Right? That's a recipe for disaster. So hopefully that was helpful, everybody. Of course, we're here for you. Jill's email is here. My email is the .com is missing because of my long name. But reach out to us, right? We're here to help, right? We're all in this together. And that's why, right, we enjoy doing these food safety chats every week and having great guests like Jill on to talk about these things. So thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it. And of course, reach out. Any closing thoughts, Jill, or anything you wanted to finish with today?
Oh gosh, no, just thanks to the audience because it's really awesome that you're here and participating and asking questions and connect with each other. That's the other part. We talk about community. The person that you see on here, like, go out and connect with them and keep them close. But thank you, Bryan, for having me on. It's always a pleasure to talk about, how do we take better care of our food safety quality teams, because we can. So let's do it together.
Absolutely. So everybody, thanks again for joining us. I know, right, this is a big time commitment out of your day, but this investment pays off, right? These type of things over time are going to give you tremendous dividends. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you for being here. And we will see you back here next Friday at the same time. So 8 a.m. Mountain, 9 a.m. Central, where Jill is located at in beautiful Minnesota. And we'll have our next chat next week. So enjoy your week. Have a fantastic weekend. Unplug, enjoy yourself if you have that opportunity, and get back to it on Monday and protect food safety. So we'll see everybody next week. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.